Yeah. New guys coming to you live. You could bet this like Jerome. New guys are men of steel. Best coverage in the league. Prime Reavers on the field. Don't know better ask. Nick, the hype is real. Gurus with the knowledge, you can check the mass appeal. They gon' turn your fantasies into dollar bills, making dynasties from drafts like the Spurs when they build. Want the bragging rights and titles at your work. Let the new guys serve the wisdom to you first. I ain't advertising, just kicking facts. They turn average Joes to Drakes cause they winning back to backs. So sit back, relax, all ears when they speak, and rain on competition with anything they leak. Make leagues joy gray like Ramsey did Reek. Passing off the mic, I'm out here, peace.
Happy Friday, everybody. TGIF, welcome. Hey, cuz, how's it going?
What's up, cuz? I see you sporting the basketball jersey, getting ready for the season.
Hey, I don't know if you know this, but
I hope it's not brown on the back.
love is in the air tonight.
Guys, we're the best player.
So, yeah, because this is our last recording before basketball begins, I figured, why not? So, go Cleveland. It's going to be a rough year, but we're not going to talk about that. We're here for football, not basketball. So, before we get started, once again, some housekeeping. Nick, you actually caught up last week. We had differences on 3 games. Atlanta at Pitt, which I got right. Pittsburgh won 41-17. The Giants at Carolina, another heartbreaker for my team. But you won that one on a career-high 63-yard field goal for Grant Gano. And then Minnesota at Philly. Minnesota won a close one as well, 23-21. So you closed the gap, and I now lead 4-3. So now that we have that out of the way, once again we're going to do the recap from last week. But before we do, we just wanted to get into a couple players who will be returning and or debuting this week. So Nick, I would like to get started. I will ask you about your boy Marlon Mack. How do you feel about his entry into the lineup? Is he going to start? Do you, as a fantasy owner, want to wait and see what happens? What's your opinion on this?
I think it has a much bigger impact for the Colts than it does for fantasy.
Okay.
They've gone out and said he's the starting back, but they continue to want to use Wilkins and Nyheim Hines. Obviously, has shown a lot the last couple of weeks, so they'll probably keep him as the third down back because he holds a pretty important role. But from a fantasy aspect, I just can't see him doing too much. He kind of has a little Saquon Barkley in Marlon Mack. I know that's a big thing to say.
That's a
Nowhere near
bold
as good as
statement.
Saquon Barkley. But they kind of have this thing where they'll go and get a bunch of 1 or 2 yard runs, but then there's like a play. Obviously, he doesn't have the ability that Saquon does, but for Marlon Mack can turn nothing into something and bust off a 25-yard run that it looked like wasn't even anything there. So I think that'll have a big impact for the Colts, but I can't see you starting him this week or any time in the future or the near future.
Okay, fair enough. At the beginning of the year, I feel like most people thought this was a committee. Nyheim Hines has looked great, but I feel like Marlon Mack returning is just sort of goes along with that. It's still a committee.
Yeah.
A committee approach. Another returning athlete is tight end Greg Olsen, who I guess I'll take the reins on this one. I think he's going to be a top tight end if he could stay healthy, top 6 or 7 tight end the rest of the way. But I would not play him this week just because it's his first week back. He might be on a pitch count. You know, he might mentally not be ready for a full workload. And Washington's actually had a decent defense thus far in the year. They had a bye already, so they're decently well rested despite last week's terrible showing. I think they'll come out and play this week, and they're home. So I think Greg Olsen, you want to go out and grab him if he's available, but I would not start him this week unless you initially had him, he got hurt, and you've been just sort of streaming tight ends.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how this is going to shake out yet. O.J. Howard was projected to miss 2 to 4 weeks. but now there's a chance he might play. He's practiced in limited fashion all week. Are either of the tight ends in Tampa startable, Cameron Brate or O.J. Howard? Or do you think he'll be working in limited fashion and just they'll sort of eat into each other this week?
Yeah, I'd probably let it play out. I don't think I'd either of them. Maybe if you were in a pinch, just take a guess with either of them. But I just can't see either of them doing too much, especially as they still have Deshaun Jackson and Mike Evans there this week anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll turn them or lean on them more. So
and Chris Godwin's played pretty well as well.
Yeah, he has. So I'd probably just let it play out another week.
Okay. And the last person I just wanted to get into is, as of today, Devontae Freeman has been ruled out. Not with his knee issue that he's had thus far throughout the year, but a foot issue. I think it's a bone contusion. So once again, Devontae Freeman will not be playing this week, which makes Tevin Coleman and Ito Smith the 1 and 2 running backs for Atlanta. Against Tampa at home, I think Tevin Coleman's a very solid play. Tampa's defense does not scare you at all. So I expect Coleman to get 15 to 20 touches and be a top 15 guy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Ito will get about 10 touches maybe, just a guess. But he'll be involved a lot more because Freeman is out. And in a week where Detroit and the Saints are on byes, no Kamara, no Mark Ingram, no Kerryon Johnson, you may have to start someone that you don't normally, and Ito Smith is a decent option to look into. So, anyway, we'll get into the recap from last week, and we'll start with you, Nick, because your Colts played at Foxborough and lost 38-24 to Tom Brady. What did you see?
What did I see? I saw our defense couldn't stop a nosebleed, and our wide receivers couldn't catch a cold. Drops. Again, that's the big storyline for the second week.
There were a lot of drops.
That T.Y. Hilton, that Mac Doyle, just no one could hold onto the ball. It was like 15 drops in the last 2 weeks. And give Andrew Luck credit, he was within 7 points with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter of the Patriots, and he was playing by himself. Eric Ebron had a big day. I think he's moved to the number 2 spot for tight ends, and from a fantasy perspective, he had 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. But even he had a few drops early in the game. And I don't know. And we just need people to step up and make some big plays, and that didn't really happen. We definitely are a little healthier this week. We were missing about 10 starters, and then 2 went down in the game, so I think we ended up missing 12 starters in total for that game, which is not a good number. We'll still probably be missing about 5 for the Jets on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But against much worse competition than New England, I'm feeling more confident. But
Okay.
yeah, just drop some people that need to step up. That's why we lost that game.
And Darius Leonard will be returning. He leads the league in tackles. He's my IDP. So, big boost to the Colts defense. Are you concerned about Eric Ebron? Because I know Jack Doyle is not playing, but Ebron's a little banged up in a bunch of areas. He practiced today. They think he's going to play, but I think a quad, an ankle, and a knee aggravation.
He had 4 injuries, yesterday. I think it was like a calf, a knee, a quad, shin. There's a lot of stuff.
Everything.
He did practice, so I think he'll play. Just
Okay.
because usually it points as a sign that you're trending up. And with no other reliable tight end that's not injured right now, I think they'll step up.
So, one last question for you on the Colts side. Who's going to be the right wide receiver to step up, if anyone?
I would probably go with Chester Rogers. Ryan Grant's technically number 2 on the depth chart, but most of his routes are within 5 to 10 yards. He's the guy who'll get a first down, but he doesn't do anything. He has the best hands on the team. He probably has better hands than T.Y. Hilton, honestly, but he's nowhere near as good as T.Y. Hilton. But Chester Rogers has the big playability, and his yards after the catch are awesome. Spin moves and everything, but he drops a lot of balls. But I don't know, overall in a big impact, I think there will be some mistakes by him. I could see him having a big game.
Okay. On the Patriots side, everyone's a weapon. They're pretty healthy on offense. They have Gronk, Josh Gordon, ran more routes this week, saw a higher snap count this week, and I think we'll just continue to use him more as the season progresses. Sony Michel had just under 100 yards. James White is an elite pass catching back. There's really not much to say. The Patriots, people will go off almost every week. It's just a matter of who. Is there anything you wanted to speak about the Patriots?
Sony Michel, yeah, as you touched on, he had another big game. That's 2 or 3 in a row. I think they found their guy. Finally, solid running back. I know they still have James White there, but he mostly passing downs.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just keep starting Sony Michel.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. This game, I think we could pretty much just glance over. Tennessee at Buffalo. Buffalo won 13-12. The passing leader was Mariota with 129 yards. The rushing leader was McCoy with 85, and the receiving leader was Corey Davis with 49. There was really not much to say about this game.
This is why I know the Titans were mouthing off about they don't get respect and how they're a solid team in this league
and how they beat Jacksonville
and stuff, and then they go and lose to the Bills 13-12. And this is just why you cannot count on Marcus Mariota. 129 yards won't do it.
Nope.
12 points won't do it. You got to score more points against a team that is not good.
Yeah.
So, that's it. That's really it.
Buffalo now has wins over the Vikings and the Titans, and a lot of people wrote them off as the worst team in the NFL at the beginning of the year, and I still think that might be the case, but they've pulled together for some surprising victories.
Yeah.
So, I'll give them credit. I mean, they were a playoff team last year, so there's that. Anyway, let's fast forward. Miami at Cincinnati. Bengals won 27-17. Dalton had another good game, 248 yards. Joe Mixon got thrown into the fire due to the Giovanni Bernard injury, but he produced 22 carries, 93 yards, 3 targets for 22 and a touchdown. I don't think you have any concern with Joe Mixon going forward. I do just want to mention on the Miami side, Kenyon Drake was a little more involved, more so in the passing game than the running game, but it still didn't give me a lot of confidence in him. And on the Miami offensive side, 2 picks, a fumble, 3 sacks Miami's O-line allowed. They just did not look good offensively.
Yeah. Cincinnati came back there down most of the game. I thought they did a good job of rebounding.
Mm-hmm.
But the Dolphins again didn't show up second week in a row. They were off to a promising start. Has since not looked too good.
Well, since then they've versed some real competition. They had a very soft schedule initially.
I think you gotta call the Bengals a good team at this point. I don't think it's a fluke. I think they're just a good rounded team. And I didn't see it coming. I thought they were going to be an awful team this year, but looking pretty good.
So, I thought they'd be improved. I didn't think they'd be this good, and part of it, as a Giants fan, really kind of hurts. I've had this discussion with a few of my Giants friends as well. We gave up on Bobby Hart because we thought Eric Flowers would turn things around. Bobby Hart had a slow start to his career, but looks pretty solid for the Bengals line.
Yeah.
And, Dalton's getting time. Mixon's performing. They're just... The improvements they've made to their offensive line have worked, whereas in comparison, the improvements the Giants have made to their offensive line have not. So, Miami, I don't feel confident in any of their receivers. Their offense really doesn't look good, especially if they're going to turn the ball over 3 or 4 times a game. You did mention Baltimore. Baltimore at Cleveland was another low-scoring game. Cleveland won in overtime 12-9. Baker Mayfield had 342 yards. John Brown did receive 14 targets. You know, he had a poor performance, box score-wise. Just they weren't able to connect for a lot of those. But he did see 14 targets, caught 4 for 58. Is there anything you noticed in this game specifically?
I'm just surprised. I thought the Ravens were going to win and should have won by a hefty enough margin, maybe a touchdown or something.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they played down. They didn't play to their level. So I don't know. I think that offense took a whole big step back. They were doing some good things first 5 weeks, really stretching the field, and that just didn't show this week.
Cleveland has played a lot better at the dog pound also, just to give them a little bit of credit. And 2 wins now.
Yeah, they're good for them.
So, yep. I guess we'll go on. Green Bay at Detroit, which may have been one of the more surprising games of the week. Detroit won at home 31-23. 2 early fumbles in this game really dug Green Bay into a hole where they had to abandon the run. Aaron Jones, who many, including myself, keep thinking is going to break out, only saw 7 carries because they were in catch-up mode the whole game. Aaron Rodgers had a big game because of this. Completed 32 out of 52 passes, 442 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But unfortunately, it was not enough. And I do just want to mention on the Detroit side, once again, Kerryon Johnson and LeGarrette Blount sort of split carries. They had 12 apiece. Kerryon was much more effective. He had average 5.8 yards per carry. But they do continue to split carries, which must be kind of aggravating for Kerryon Johnson owners. And Devontae Adams went off, 9 receptions for 140 and a touchdown. So,
yeah, you're missing the real MVP of this game, though.
Who's that?
Crosby.
Oh no,
13 points, I think it was. He cost his team. Not great. That's why Aaron Rodgers didn't have the comeback.
So they lost by 8 points. Mason Crosby went 1 for 5 in field goal attempts and 0 for 1 in extra points.
Not great for the Browns.
Not at all. In my 4 leagues, I owned Crosby in 3 of them, and after that, I've dropped him in 2 of them. I just, for kickers, a lot of it is confidence, and I don't see how he's going to have confidence after that. But it's unfortunate for Green Bay, but, the rest of that division, congrats. Anyway, next was Jacksonville at Kansas City. I'll let you take this one. Kansas City won 30-14. What did you see?
I saw Blake Bortles making me very happy because I'm sick and tired of every 3 or 4 weeks Blake Bortles passing for 300 yards and everyone's talking about how, you know what, he might be good enough. He definitely is not good enough. I saw like a whole highlight montage of his throws, and they were some of the worst throws I've ever seen.
He played like Blake Bortles.
You ever see Friday Night Lights, the TV show?
Yeah.
Basically, the backup quarterback comes in the first game. Matt Saracen never played before, and the first play he drops the snap. The second play he throws the ball, hits his lineman's head. The third play he just throws it near. And that's what it reminded me of. It looked like Blake Bortles never stepped on a football field before, and it was just so bad.
So I agree with you, but I do just want to play devil's advocate here because I find it funny. You mentioned every couple games he throws for over 300 yards and all that. It goes unnoticed. He actually threw for 430 yards in this game.
Yeah,
So
really?
the yardage was there, along with 5 sacks and 4 picks. So, but
yeah, I mean they were down the whole game, and Kansas City had the 32nd ranked defense going into the game, though I think. So that's
I agree with you. I just wanted to throw that out there for our bookies, but you can't trust Blake Bortles. He's just not a consistent quarterback. What about Kansas City?
I think Kansas City looked awesome. That offense was rolling. They had a lot of help due to all the turnovers and short field and stuff. But I mean, what they put up 31 points?
30 even.
30 points on the best defense in football is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially when you get down to the red zone, it's kind of hard to score on teams like that. But they made it work. And I don't even think Mahomes had that big of a game. I think it was just more an overall team effort.
Yeah, this was the first game where Mahomes didn't throw for a touchdown. He did run for one, though. Travis Kelce had 100 yards on 8 targets, 5 receptions. Sammy Watkins actually saw 1 target more than Tyreek Hill. I don't think that's a concern for Hill owners because he also saw a couple carries and, just going forward. I think that speaks more to Sammy Watkins having consistent relevance more so than a passing of the guard or anything like that. But yeah, Kansas City, I was actually wrong on this last week. I predicted that they would not be undefeated at this point in the year, that they would lose to Jacksonville, and they proved me wrong. So, thus far, they do seem to be the real deal, but we'll see this week. I believe they have the Patriots on Sunday night, so we'll see what happens there. Next, we have Denver losing 16-34 against the Jets, and Isaiah Crowell went absolutely off in this game.
That's awesome. I don't know where that came from.
The man had 15 carries, averaged 14.6 yards per carry because he went for 219 yards and a touchdown, breaking off multiple big plays. And he actually caught his only target for 12 yards as well. Bilal Powell ran for 99 yards also. They ran the ball all game. 38 total rushes. And just completely ran through Denver's D-line.
Yeah.
So I feel like this isn't a bold statement. That's not going to continue. If you're a Crowell owner, he's not going to get you 219 yards and a touchdown every game. I think sometimes players have an outlier game. They'll continue to produce on the ground, but I think this is that outlier game. They're not going to run for 323 yards at any point this year again. I feel like that's not that bold to say. So, Denver, 12-5 carry split in favor of Phillip Lindsay. Both backs were pretty effective. Actually, Royce Freeman was more effective on the ground. His yard per carry, he ran for 6.2 yards per carry, but he only saw 5 carries. So, that's a bit concerning, although if you're a Freeman owner, you've been concerned all year. And Demaryius Thomas got back on track this game with 105 yards and a touchdown, and he caught 5 of his 6 targets. Did I miss anything in this game?
Not really, yeah. Their running game was the main headline.
Mm-hmm. All right. We'll go forward, and what do we have? Atlanta at Pittsburgh. And take it away, Nick.
Yeah, I was disappointed in Atlanta. I really thought they were going to win, and they were nowhere near winning. Was it by over 20, I think? Something like that.
41-17.
James Conner, that breakout game. I mean, not really breakout, but really his first big game since week 1. He looked awesome. Couldn't be stopped. And yeah, the whole offense was rolling with AB. AB went off. But Atlanta did not look good at that team this year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they'll come back from this. 1-4. It's hard, especially in that division. So I would not be encouraged if I was a Falcons fan.
Oh yeah, their defense got crippled early on in this year, and Julio Jones continues to avoid touchdowns.
Yeah.
But I sort of feel about Tampa the way I feel about the Falcons. Both those teams don't have a defense. So for fantasy purposes, they're going to continue to throw and produce on offense, which benefits Calvin Ridley, Sanu, Jones. But I agree, for a football perspective, Atlanta's dug themselves a pretty steep hole. I just want to mention about James Conner. You said this was his first really big game since week 1. This was the first game other than week 1 that he's had more than 15 carries. So a lot of that is volume based. He did break out for 110 yards and 2 scores in this one. But a couple of those games, he just wasn't getting the workload. Weeks 2 and 4, he had less than 10 carries. So I think those were just games that sort of went away from him. And they want to get him the ball. I know Pittsburgh plans to continue utilizing him even after Bell reports, which is rumored to be week 7. So let me get your input on this. How is that going to play out when and if Bell returns?
It's probably the Bell show, fortunately. I think Connor will be in the, I don't know, maybe 5 to 7 range of carries per game. I don't think he'll totally be eliminated, but a lot less than the 15 he got this week.
Mm-hmm.
Or however more, I don't know, whatever he got this week.
21.
21, okay, yeah, so a lot less than that.
Yeah.
So, you have the best running back in football. Might be your last season with him. If you're trying to make a playoff push, just start with the best player. Don't give in to the drama or anything or any of that. Just play the best guy, and Bell's the best guy, and Bell is the best guy. I don't think Connor will be totally eliminated. I still think around 5 carries, and then maybe a little bit in the passing game, but obviously not too much. Because Le'Veon Bell's probably the best pass catching running back in the league, besides Alvin Kamara.
It's going to be interesting to see if he does report during their bye, not this week, but the following, or if he ends up being traded. A couple sources have linked Bell to the Jets and also to Philly now that J.J. is out for the year. So I think if you're Pittsburgh, you have to see what you could get for him, because I'd say it's pretty safe to say he's not going to be returning to the Steelers next year. So, I mean, I know it stinks for the organization to have to ship out the best running back in football, but at this point, get some value while you can, right?
Yeah, you might as well.
So we'll see what happens, and we'll keep you updated on that. Next is that heartbreaking loss my Giants suffered to the Carolina Panthers, and of course, after last night, I really just don't want to talk about the Giants.
We'll get into the second Giants game later. You want to take this one? You want me to take it?
I'll take this one because... No, you could take this one. You could take this one. Go ahead.
Giants actually played better than I thought they would. I think Carolina's a very good team. It was a heartbreaker at the end. A couple questionable calls by the refs, especially on that 3rd and 1 where Christian McCaffrey ran it. It seemed as if he didn't get the first down, and then Cam spiked the ball. The optics were wrong on the TV, and the refs did say he got it, but it wasn't reviewed the play. And then the league tried to justify it by saying it was reviewed and it would have been overturned anyway. So that was a whole mess. Giants continue to be haunted by these awful calls. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't blame the calls every week. It comes down to on the field. And Graham Gano ended up kicking, I think, a 61-yarder to win it all. 61, 63, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Heartbreaking for the Giants. But, I don't know. You got to move on.
Well, in this game, they finally made it a point to get Odell the ball. he saw 14 targets. He threw for a touchdown, which was the biggest throw of the game. 57-yard touchdown to Saquon Barkley. But they also used Odell in returns, which was unfortunate because that led directly to a Carolina touchdown at one point. He just sort of bobbled the return. So that was unfortunate. And while we did look better in this game, despite the poor outcome, many assumed the Giants would use this to sort of take a step forward for this week. For those of you who missed it, that did not happen last night. The Giants got steamrolled by Philadelphia 34-13, and Eli was getting booed at home for just checking down, short yard plays. There was really nothing downfield. First couple plays of the game, Eli forced a ball to our third string tight end because Red Ellison didn't play in this game either, which led to a pick around the 20-yard line. And just right out of the gates, the offense looked terrible. Eli averaged 6.5 yards per pass, 4 sacks, 1 pick, no touchdown, and it just nothing got going. Odell left the game before halftime. The team later said it was to get an IV, but it was pretty obvious it was out of frustration. So now the 1-5 Giants surprisingly still aren't out of winning the NFC East, but I've completely lowered my expectations on this team and think we should consider embracing the tank. But yeah, we will go on because I don't want to talk about the Giants anymore. Oakland at LA. The Chargers won 26-10. And go ahead, Nick. Have at it.
I don't really watch this game too much. Wasn't surprised. Thought the Chargers were the much better team. Melvin Gordon had another big week, I believe, right?
Yeah, Melvin Gordon, only 58 yards on the ground, but he had a touchdown, and then he ended up catching all 4 targets for 62 yards.
Yeah, so he had a pretty big week. I think he's pretty underrated. I think when you list the top backs in the league, you don't really include him too often. He just gets overlooked. But he runs hard. He plays hard. Fantasy always puts up good numbers. So he's rolling right now. I think that Chargers team's dangerous. I don't think they have many weaknesses. They still don't have Joey Bosa, I don't think. I think they get him back soon. So that's their best defensive player right there.
Mm-hmm.
I can see them honestly being a contender in the AFC.
They definitely can.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen had a big game as well. 8 receptions for 90 yards. So especially in PPR formats, you like to see that. And once again, Austin Eckler performed on a very, very limited workload. He only had 6 rushes for 15 yards, and he saw 3 targets. He only caught 1 of them, but that 1 reception went for 44 yards and a touchdown. So week in and week out, he keeps getting it done despite the workload. If you're a Marshawn Lynch owner, I wouldn't be too concerned. At the half, LA led 17-3. Entering the fourth, they led 20-3. So really, this was just a game where Oakland had to abandon the run. Martavis Bryant caught all 3 targets for 91 yards, but once again, I don't really think that's going to be the norm. I think this is a team that wants to run the ball. So I wouldn't expect that from Martavis Bryant every week, although it is nice to see from a player who got cut by this roster about a month ago. It is nice to see him being involved again. So, anything else on this game?
No,
Next we have my page froze. Alright, there we go. Minnesota at Philly. Vikings almost blew another lead in this one, but they held on to win 23-21. Carson Wentz looked good once again, 311 yards. Many thought he might have to work his way into the production we saw last year out of him. But he threw for 2 touchdowns, scrambled, 5 rushes for 26, and looked pretty convincing. Not quite his MVP numbers as last year, but definitely looks like the franchise quarterback many thought they drafted.
Yeah, he looks good.
Kirk Cousins actually completed 30 out of 37 passes, so he was very efficient on the night. Also broke 300 yards and 1 touchdown. So, was there any surprises here? Zach Ertz went off, Adam Thielen went off, Stephon Diggs went off. Pretty much everything you normally expect.
Yeah, Adam Thielen's been looking awesome. Not a surprise, but yeah, I saw something. I think he's only 3 people to start the first 5 games of the season with 100 yards in each game. That's pretty cool stat, I guess.
Yeah, and healthy, no signs of slowing down. This is a trend that should continue. For time's sake, I guess we'll move on then. Next was Arizona at San Fran, and the Cardinals finally got their first win of the season, 28-18. A lot of this was due to Christian Kirk having a long 75-yard touchdown and David Johnson finally being used. Well, he was used last week as well, like a workhorse back. He had 18 carries, 3 targets. I still don't think this is a good team, but they are playing to their strengths at least. So, Larry Fitzgerald wasn't really utilized, but he is not exactly healthy. So I think they'll look for him more going forward, but this was a winnable game, and for what it's worth, they did it. So, welcome back, Nick.
Yeah, my bad. Little situation.
It's all good. I just touched on the Arizona side, so if you want to get into San Fran?
Yeah. Not too much. San Fran's not very good of a football team without their quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. I think the Cardinals played good. Yeah, I don't know. San Fran played bad. I didn't see too much.
Mm-hmm.
I still do like Matt Breida a lot. I think he's a good running back. I think he's a stud. I think he's good if you play it if you have it. Outside of George Kittle, I would not advise playing anybody else in the passing game, any wide receivers or anything. So not too many options to choose from on that San Fran offense.
I agree. This was a big Alfred Morris game, but I think Breida didn't play part of it, I want to say.
I'm just talking about going forward.
Yeah, going forward, I agree. Matt Breida's the one to own. Kyle Juszczyk had some streamer potential in this game and didn't disappoint. 6 receptions for 75 yards and 1 carry for 12. So if you were desperate and played him, or if you played him in daily, that's a decent performance. So, and I agree, George Kittle's the only receiver. Pierre Garçon's been pretty irrelevant. Saw 12 targets, but only caught 5 for 47. I would not completely rule out Marquise Goodwin. He, once again, did not play. I would not feel comfortable starting him right away, but maybe he can end up being a relevant receiver if he ever gets right this year. But I agree, it's really just George Kittle and Matt Breida with not a lot of confidence anywhere else. So the Rams finally saw, I'd say, reasonable competition. They won against Seattle on the road 33 to 31. 33 to 31. But they entered the fourth quarter down by a touchdown, so outscoring Seattle 9-0 in the fourth quarter, ended up salvaging the game for the Rams. Jared Goff once again looked pretty legit, 321 yards and a touchdown. He did have 2 picks, but averaged 10 yards per catch, which is a pretty high rate compared to most quarterbacks in the league. Chris Carson ran for 116 yards on 19 carries, and Mike Davis has surpassed Rashad Penny as the second running back on this depth chart. He saw 12 carries for 68 yards. Do you think this is a backfield that will continue to mix it up, or you think it's Carson and Mike Davis going forward?
I don't know. This is such a weird situation they have going on. You draft a running back in the first round, you expect him to play, he misses time, so the backup Chris Carson takes the job, does well with the job. Then you get this guy Mike Davis, who's like a fullback. He comes in and takes time away, so it's just a weird situation. I think Mike Davis has played really well. I think he was averaging like 6 yards a carry or something this week. But I just can't see them shying away from Rashad Penny that much. I feel like they want to get him involved due to him being such a high pick. So I don't know. I still think Carson of all looks the guy to own right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how much trust I put in Mike Davis just because I don't think you have as much of a chance as Rashad Penny.
Yeah, I agree in this being sort of a weird game. In a game where Seattle did not turn the ball over once. They didn't turn it over at all. They only threw the ball 21 times, and their top receiver, Doug Baldwin, 1 reception for 1 yard.
Yeah, not great.
So this was just really a very weird game from Seattle. I know they want to run the ball. They want to be a run-first offense, but I agree with you. They're going to want to get their rookie running back involved, and they're going to want to get their top receiver involved in most games. On the other side, Robert Woods, 5 receptions, 92 yards. Cooper Kupp, 6 receptions, 90 and a touchdown. And Todd Gurley did Todd Gurley things. So
Yeah. Not too much on the Rams side.
not too much on the Rams side.
They're both studs. We know that. We can move on.
Yep. Dallas at Houston. Another overtime game. We're seeing a lot of these this year. And Houston won. I think this is their second week in a row. They won in overtime, 19-16 on a field goal. Zeke was pretty much held in check in this game, actually. 20 carries, only 54 yards. He did actually have 7 receptions for 30, which salvaged his performance, but rushing-wise, he was kind of held in check. Dallas continues to have an abysmal aerial attack, and I don't think that's going to change going forward. Hey, my dad just got home. Deshaun Watson is really coming back to form. 33 out of 44 for 375, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. And I just want to mention, just because I did lose in the league I played him in, but last week I picked up Alfred Blue to stream, and Lamar Miller didn't play in this game. He'll be back next week, but I don't think Alfred Blue is going to completely disappear because he caught all 8 targets for 73 yards and ran the ball 20 times for 46. Other than DeAndre Hopkins, he was their most effective playmaker in this game. And the week before, he was seeing an increase in carries as well, even before this week that Lamar Miller missed. So I don't want to say this is a full-blown committee, but at some point, Foreman's going to return as well. And I think if you're a Lamar Miller owner, you may want to try to get rid of him while you can before he loses all value, because I do think it's almost inevitable that this will be a committee at some point.
Yep.
Let me ask you, because for the second straight week, Kiki Cutie?
Yeah, Cutie, something like that. I don't know.
Had another big game. Will Fuller was pretty irrelevant in this one, but I know he was kind of banged up, used more so as a decoy here. do you think this backfield has 3 relevant pass catchers now, or do you think either Fuller or Cutie will take the role and run with it?
I do like the cutie guy, I don't know his name. But first week was against the Colts, and the Colts have a history of letting mid-tier receivers expose them. Guys like Cameron Meredith, I don't know, guys in that range always have their breakout game against the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to take this out of that. And this week was okay. A touchdown kind of salvaged his stat line, made it look better than it was. But I like him. I think he's different than the other two. He's not as much of a big play guy. He's kind of he's not as much of a stretch the field guy. He's kind of a short pass and then a lot of yards after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he complements him well. But I think you need to see a couple more weeks out of him to consider it a relevant receiver.
And I agree. This was a game where Will Fuller only saw 3 targets, but again, I think he was still a little banged up. I don't think their tight end, Ryan Griffin, sees 9 targets in a normal game. I think this was just game script. So I agree, Hopkins and Fuller going forward still, but Cutie, wait and see. Last game was Washington against the Saints in Drew Brees' record-breaking game. Would you like to start us off?
Yeah, good for Drew Brees. That was pretty awesome watching him. Well, I mean, he broke my boy Peyton's record, so that wasn't too awesome. But he's a good guy. I think most quarterbacks want to be like him. He was, I mean, most people wrote him off in 2006. I think that was the year his injury happened. Thought he wouldn't play again. I think they kept saying it. Like, doctor said he had a 25% chance to play again or something. And ends up being one of the best catchers of all time. I guess just looking at that, like, makes you think about where he ranks all time. But not that I'm part of the Drew Brees fan club or anything. We get into the actual game. I think the Redskins looked awful. I know the Saints had a lot of emotions and hype going into this because of the record and all that. But I think they're just a much better team, and it really showed that game.
Mm-hmm.
I think Washington just looked lost out there.
I agree. I think the Saints' defense, despite the rough start, is starting to find their rhythm and get back on track. You know, they had a great defense last year, and many of those pieces returned. And, you know, the rough start, it was like, oh, the Saints have no defense, but I think they're starting to right that ship. And we talk about efficiency with 1 or 2 quarterbacks before. Drew Brees, 26 for 29. Unworldly. He threw for 363 and 3 touchdowns. I believe his record-breaking touchdown went to rookie Traquan Smith, who had 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it was sort of his coming out party. And I just want to mention for any Kamara owners out there, I don't think you're nervous going forward in his usage. In this game, Mark Ingram saw 16 carries to Kamara's 6. Mark Ingram had 3 targets to Kamara's 4. I think this was just sort of a game they wanted to give Alvin Kamara a rest due to his heavy usage up until this point in the year, and they wanted to sort of welcome Mark Ingram back, so to speak. I still think it's a 1-2 punch where they're both potentially top 15 running backs, with Kamara being the lead back of the two. And they're on a bye week this week. So I think they just wanted to give Alvin Kamara an early rest, and you shouldn't be nervous going forward. It was just a game script.
Yeah.
For Washington, Peterson's a little banged up. His shoulder, he apparently popped it back into place during this game. And they got down early in this one, so again, they just abandoned the run. That's going to continue to be a theme for Adrian Peterson owners. In games where they're down, he won't be used. In games where they're up, he'll get 15-20 carries. So anyway, that does it on our recap. Is there anything specific you wanted to get into?
Nah, not really.
I know we covered a lot before we started the recap. Once again, I don't know if we're going to get to record our game differential, so we'll just tally that up and I'll post it because I'm going to Seattle this week. So
Big business, man.
big business, hopefully. Anyway, good luck in week 6, everybody. Except for you, cuz. I hope your team loses.
I don't know about that one.
And we will catch you next week.
Peace, guys.